Sometimes Zoom does funny things. There we are. Happy Friday, everyone. Jen Lee, aka Rebel Esquire, doing our regular Friday Rebel Roundtable. And I am fortunate enough today to be joined by Sanjit Singh, owner of Bolt, and he's a fractional chief revenue officer. And I know how much lawyers like talking about sales and sales strategies. And Sanjit is here to help us through that. So, Sanjit, introduce yourself, tell us what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, as you said, I'm a fractional chief revenue officer, which is just a fancy way of saying that I help people grow revenue faster and more affordably. My background's a little bit unusual for doing what I do. I did start out working for large companies as a sales leader, working at scale, and then I built businesses for a number of years and on my own. It's small businesses, and I built a large tech business with a partner of mine, and then got very burned out and decided to help other people grow their businesses. And now I also do executive coaching
Okay.
as well. Yeah.
Very cool. And so you've helped scale startups and
Yeah.
build these repeatable sales systems. What's
Right.
the biggest mind shift? Because I'm always talking about mindset and things
Mm,
with lawyers. What's the
yeah.
shift that lawyers need to adopt if they want to grow like a startup or
Yeah.
like that?
Well, I think lawyers are a little bit different than, let's say, a startup in the sense that, um, you know, I think lawyers are typically getting their business through referrals, reputation in the community, that sort of thing. And that's great. It's just that, and startups are sort of analogous, but different. Like they'll typically start with people they can get to, like people they know, people that are in their network, and they'll approach them if they're a good fit. Um, and then you reach the point where you're getting all the referrals you're going to get, or you've talked to all the people you're going to talk to. Then what?
Yeah.
How do you actually scale? How do you build what they call a flywheel, or a repeatable, scalable, predictable sales growth model?
Mhm.
And that's where a lot of people, understandably, struggle because that's not what they do. I mean, you're busy being a lawyer. You don't have
And
maybe
that's
the
not
time
how
to. Yeah.
lawyers think. Yeah, they don't. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
wait, I'm in business. That didn't, no, I'm a
Yeah.
lawyer. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. You certainly wouldn't want me practicing law. I
Mhm.
have not trained for it. And so I wouldn't expect people who haven't trained for it to know a lot.
Yeah.
And I have met some lawyers who are really savvy at this stuff. But I can tell they put in a lot of time and
Yeah.
study and talk to a lot of people and so on. So yeah, so there's a bunch of steps I take anybody through, including lawyers. I don't know if you want me to start
Yeah. Go
going into
ahead.
that
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
What is that? Yeah. What does the process or the sales engine look like?
Yeah. And this, I think it probably, some of this sounds like really, really basic, and yet, but it's critical. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people just miss the super important basics. We like to skip over it and say, maybe there's a magic pill over here that can get me the growth. But so the first thing I talk about is clarify, right?
Mhm.
So if I go to, as a layperson, a non-lawyer, I go to a lawyer's website. I'm looking for three things at the top of their website, as I would anybody's website I go to. A, what do you do? Who do you do it for? And if I were interested, what is the next step I should take?
Yeah.
And um, and I've gone to a lot of lawyer websites because I was giving this talk at a provisors meeting, and there was a lot of lawyers in the group, and I looked at everybody's website.
Uh-huh.
So I've seen a lot of lawyer websites, and it's rarely clear. These 3 points are very rarely clear.
Mhm.
Um, and not only that, I mean, maybe it'd be clear to an attorney, but that's not who you're selling to,
Fine.
typically, right?
Yeah.
You're selling to the client, and so you got to really put yourself in the shoes of somebody who doesn't know anything, and they're like, okay, is this business law? Is it is it some component of that? Is it contracts, or are you a startup attorney? Like, I don't even know what exactly you do and who you're doing it for.
And
Yeah,
most lawyers use a bunch of slang, like not slang,
yeah,
industry jargon,
jargon. Yeah,
law
yeah,
and bankruptcy and those kinds of
right.
things that the regular consumer isn't going to be looking for those words. They're going to be looking for their actual problem. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the problems, the common problems that you're solving?
Mhm.
Um, and then, maybe not right at the top of the page, but pretty soon thereafter, there's a few more things like social proof. Do you have other clients that are actually happy? What do they say about you, right? And then what's special about you? What's differentiated? Like if you're a business attorney, okay, there's a lot of those. Why you? You kind of have to make that sale, right?
Right.
And then, so the next thing to do is the next thing I talk about is simplify, right? Because the person coming to your website, we all are super busy and overwhelmed, and we're trying to get to the gist of things, right? So if you offer like 10 different services, that's awesome. But that can be overwhelming if you just start listing.
Yeah.
So I try to, go to something really simple, like, okay, let's look at the 80-20 rule, right? Like, where does most of your business come from? Well, 80-90% of my business comes from contracts work. Okay, well, maybe let's make that pretty prominent. Or it's these three things are where most of my business comes from. Okay, let's bury the other, seven things you do up in the menu somewhere. Let's not try to tell everybody everything all at once, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a good way to simplify, and it's a good way to specialize, right? Because you can't be all things to all people. I get that maybe you don't want to specialize too much, to serve too small a niche, but you definitely don't want to try to serve everybody everything, right?
I would likely argue that there probably isn't such a thing as too small of a niche, because the niche you get, the better, the more clients you'll find, because you're targeting very specific. So I've had that experience working with some of my lawyer clients where we've niched down considerably and they increase their business. So
can you give an example? Because I think that's a great place to talk about a couple of specifics.
Yes. What I find is, you're right. People try to think I'm going to go very broad because I'll get the most clients, like cast a wide net. And for example, a bankruptcy attorney, I'm using myself as an example. If I went out and say, I'm looking for people who want to file bankruptcy. Well, first of all, most clients don't know they need to file bankruptcy.
Right. Yeah. They don't know the conditions, which mean they're getting
they don't know how to make that legal term. So I never used bankruptcy. And then I liked working with women business owners. So then it became, I like working with women business owners who are financially stressed because of the economy. And as I got nichier like that, I got more and more women business owners saying, hey, I heard you want to go to for this. So that's an example of, you get a little nichey on it. So yeah,
that's great, because if you're a woman who's financially stressed, you're like, oh wow, this person gets me. They're going to understand all the nuances of my situation. And the other thing is to differentiate, and being narrowing your niche is part of differentiating. But I'll read some websites say, I do business law. Okay, great. A ton of people do that. Right. And then you could say, I do it, but I'm really good, or I give great service. Okay, everybody says that. Right.
At all.
Right. So it's a fair question to ask. Okay, I get that I should differentiate. How do I do that? Like, what does that look like? And I think a great way to start is to talk to your customers. And if you're super busy, hire somebody to talk to your customers. Have someone on your team talk to customers and ask them, what was the situation you were facing? Like, do a short interview, basically. What was the situation you were in before you hired such and such person? Did you talk to other attorneys? Why did you hire this person? What were the outcomes? And maybe they can even quantify the outcomes. X% growth, or whatever. If you can quantify, it's better. If you can't, that's okay. And then you take the raw material there, and you can let's say you have let's say 4 or 5 interviews. Okay, you could do something super simple, like just cram it all into ChatGPT and say, what are all these people saying that's the same? And then you say, oh, and what's really interesting is I think I've been privy to a lot of people being kind of surprised by what makes them special, because you're just doing what you're doing, right? And you don't have the chance to experience yourself as a customer. And so you can surface that.
You don't realize what your superpower is sometimes.
Right.
So a lot of us have these superpowers of, this is exactly what I do. And until you start connecting those dots, or have someone connect them for you, or Chat GPT, or a fractional revenue officer type thing, then it's just kind of floating out there. So I
That's
really
right.
appreciate the idea of checking to see what your uniqueness is. Yeah.
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 Yeah. What's your superpower? What's your uniqueness? And then like, if you think this is your most valuable offering, but customers think this is,
Yep.
you can see why if you're talking about this on your website, it's not going to be resonating as if you were talking about this. So customer interviews really inform, it can really reshape your website, and not just your website, but everything, all your digital presence, your, how you talk to customers, what you tell them when you're talking to them, hoping to be hired by them, right?
Yep. Yep.
It informs all of that.
Yeah.
So social proof is really important. So I will turn these kind of interviews into video testimonials for my clients.
Yeah.
And like short ones, people like watching short videos. Videos are usually better than making them read a 5-page case study.
Yep.
But I also do create written case studies, and I try to make them 1 page. And I try to make them, put pictures and, some words and quotes. Design elements, make them look nice and easy to read and like scan quickly. And if I do have numbers, I try to put those numbers at the top, like KPIs that I helped my customer move, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was talking with an attorney friend of mine, and she said, the way she positions herself is, I really focus on your business outcomes, because she said a lot of attorneys are just focused on, well, I'll read your contract and tell you what I don't like about it. But that's not the same. Transactional. It's like, I'll do the lawyer stuff. Yeah, but I need a business outcome. Like, I need you to be thinking sort of along the lines of what I'm trying to achieve, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a great way to position things. You can also, when you get, testimonials and case studies, put them on your website homepage, right? Make them prominent. Take really short quotes and put them throughout the website. Also, I needed to look for an attorney recently, and I'm like, I don't really know anybody that does this. And so I went to Avo, because I just need to see what people are saying and who's getting good ratings. And so I've hired a few in the last few years. I've hired a few attorneys off of Avo.
Interesting. Okay.
And so, are you asking your clients to put reviews on Avo and Google? And one of my clients, they've been around a long time. They have a couple of different businesses, and they realized that, I said, do you have like 3 reviews on Google? I said, you've been around a long time. And so I started asking their clients I said, hey, you already gave us this wonderful quote. Can you just paste it into Google? And that's all I said. And they just cut and pasted it. And all of a sudden we got 3 leads the next week through the website, and they were all really good. And they were shocked because they don't usually get good leads through their website. They get a bunch of junk. And I said, well, they're like, well, what's causing it? I said, probably the Google reviews, because Google affects your everything, right? Your ranking and
What's after our social proof?
What's that?
What's after our social proof and our client interviews? What are we looking
after that? Yeah, after that is about it's kind of going back to what you said about niche or target. So one of the things I'll often do with clients is put all of their customers in a spreadsheet and start analyzing those customers. And like, what do I notice that's the same? And like you said, if I notice, hey, you know what, there are 90% of them are women, and 95% of them are all experiencing financial stress, right? So there's a lot of interesting and very useful insights that can completely redefine how you describe what you offer. Am I too general? Am I too specialized? It sounds like it's hard to be too specialized. Specialization it sounds like really good from what you're saying.
I think as long as you're putting yourself in the right places to be found, like that's the second step of that. Like you can be really specialized, but then are you finding where your customers are at? So
that's a perfect segue into build a revenue engine. So this is where you get into, now that you have these fundamentals in the right place and you're positioning yourself right. Building a revenue engine is about the best question is the one that you just asked, which is, where are my potential clients hanging out? Like, where do they hang out in person? Where do they hang out online? And then you start going backwards from there as to how to get to them, right? So, well, the first place, actually, before I even get to that, is like, have you actually asked or had someone ask on the phone or in person, but not with a mass email? Have you asked your clients for referrals?
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, do you know another female who's business owner who's
Yep.
experiencing financial stress or whatever? And and it's good to ask clients while they're happy. If you just did something awesome for them, that's a great time to ask for a referral, right? And that's the best number one source of growing revenue. It's not totally scalable, but it's the best.
Right.
The other thing is, another great source of people who you want to do more work for is past customers
Mm-hmm.
that you had a good relationship with, or people who didn't hire you. They talked to you, but they didn't hire you, that you want to do some work for. You create a drip email. You put them in a list, and you just provide them like genuinely, authentically useful information, not like a newsletter with, hey, here's what my firm did. My firm hired 3 more people. And, that's just,
like
nobody cares, right?
Information. Yeah.
Yeah. Stuff the customers would care about.
Yeah.
And just stay on their radar, right? And that's a great way, because at some point they're going to have another need and they're going to think of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I have a love-hate relationship sometimes with some of those informational emails, because we get email overload. But then I realize when I start looking for a service provider for something, it's usually the one who has at least stood out in mind of something. So it's kind of like a love-hate. Like, I want to unsubscribe to everything, but then they're the ones I also remember. So, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you gotten emails from folks like that where you're like, oh, that was actually pretty useful? Like, they actually talked about a problem that was helpful to me. Like, yeah. So there's that too.
Yeah.
And then, this one's kind of obvious because I know a lot of lawyers do it, but I don't know if they do it enough. You'd probably be able to tell me, which is, you build a referral engine by networking strategically with other professionals like accountants or whoever, like, the question is, who has clients that have problems that I can solve?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you just, and who has a lot of those clients? And then you really want to make sure you build relationships with them, like lunch once a quarter or something like that. Right.
And I think that goes back to, again, like, sometimes it seems like common sense or things you're like, oh, well, duh, but then we don't do it. It's
right.
You have to actually create that strategic plan and those strategic partnerships and have a system for it. So you're right.
Yeah, totally. And to that point, to the point of doing things you actually know you should do, but aren't, part of it is I just don't have time, and that's no problem. It's like, maybe you can have someone on your team or hire somebody that can start mapping the landscape and then book a lunch for you once, reach out to these people, book a lunch once a quarter, and then you just have to show up to lunch, easy. Join boards, associations where you're likely to meet potential clients. Thought leadership is a great way to do it, which is what you're doing right now, Jen.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I would like you to dig in more to thought leadership, and not necessarily about me, because it doesn't have to be about me, but just what thought leadership is and how that comes out in the marketing and sales process.
Right. Yeah. So thought leadership is, information that is really useful to your clients, that really differentiates you, areas where you have strong opinions. And because they are obviously you've deeply considered them, and you've helped a lot of clients solve problems, and it's not obvious. And, those are great places. That's a great kind of information to share. But I mentioned you, Jen, because, video is usually better than something written. Live video is really good. I think we talked for a minute that one of the reasons you do this live is because it offers better rankings on LinkedIn and YouTube, right? Mm-hmm. And so you really thought this through, right? That's why this is a great medium. But it could be something else. It could be a podcast where you interview clients. It could be white papers, or it could be just short articles, right? Mm-hmm. You write content, post it on your site, share it on social media. You could write original articles on LinkedIn, which LinkedIn likes. If you haven't published them on your website, they really like that. Webinars is a great way to, free webinars is a great way to share some free information. And then you get a lot of your target audience, or then maybe they watch a replay or watch a video, and then they can,
some kind of,
because, now they kind of, I feel like I know that person a little bit. I trust them. They seem like somebody I could work with, and so on.
Yeah, exactly.
Another way, and this, then you get into really hardcore marketing, right? Like retargeting is a good one, because which just means anybody that's come to your website that didn't click contact us or, click a link to send their information to you, you can retarget them with ads. And that's a great place to go because they're already sort of semi-qualified. We know that they had at least some curiosity and interest.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not a good fit, but half the battle is done. They have some interest, and then you retarget them with ads.
Yeah.
And then of course you have SEO, search engine optimization, pay-per-click, PPC.
Bane of every lawyer's existence.
The bane of everyone's existence. Yeah, well, those are tricky and they can be expensive and take a long time. And pay-per-click's a little more direct, but that can also be pricey. One of the ones that I do for almost all my clients it's a less obvious one, is I use tools to proactively reach out to potential clients on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And so there's tools now. Some of these tools are getting, we're having a little bit more challenge with them just because LinkedIn's getting more strict, but there are tools out there like Meet Alfred or Duck Soup, DUX, Duck Soup. So there's tools like that.
I have to ask you though, on those tools, are those the ones where I get these like automated messages every couple of days saying, hey, I want to meet with you and schedule a meeting? Because those I automatically delete because I get really annoyed with all these.
Well, yes, but it sounds like, but a lot of it's done very, very poorly.
Okay.
Right. So
there's a good way to do it, is what you're saying.
I think there's a very good, much better way to do it. And that is, so those usually just come out of the blue. So what I prefer to do is, what the tools allow you to do is you select an audience and you select a very small specific audience and you do them one audience at a time. Okay. But it's still automated, so it's not going to take a ton of your time, or you hire somebody to do this. And let's say you're going to target, female business owners. We can't tell whether or not they're having, actually you can't target by gender on LinkedIn. So maybe you target business owners in a certain geography, certain business size, whatever.
Yeah.
But then if you solve, let's say 3 or 4 different common problems for them, you start out by sending, you can actually have the bot look at the person's profile. Now they know you looked at their profile. Then you can have it go and like a couple of the recent posts. Then you can offer a connection. You can ask for a connection. And the person has the choice whether to connect with you or not. And you can send a connection message that sort of says, hey, I do this kind of work. I help solve these kind of problems. I'd love to connect. Now you're really being very upfront about what it is.
That is fine. Yeah. For the most part, no problem with that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. See, now that once they accept the connection, well, first of all, they may look at your profile and say, actually, I do have a problem. They may just contact you, right? Or they may accept the connection, and then, then it sends maybe 2 or 3 messages over a few months, nothing too horrible.
Yeah.
And it talks about, hey, if you're experiencing these kind of problems, or I see that you're in this kind of space or whatever, and I solve these kind of problems for people in this space. Now it's much more tailored. And, hey, if that's of interest to you, here's my calendar link. Okay. Right. And they can just book a meeting with you. Yeah. And they may reply with questions and then you can respond, or they may just book a meeting. So I think those are good because email has been real challenging since email marketing, since Google changed its, I think February of last year, they made it much more difficult to do email marketing.
In the inboxes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. To get in the inbox. Right.
Okay. That's all. I'm a total marketing and sales nerd and not an expert like you are, but and most lawyers are not. So I always have to keep that in mind. But if there was something that a lawyer were to take action on, like what's the first action item? They're not even thinking about doing this. They're interested, but they just don't know where to start.
If out of all these things I talked about?
Yeah. Like if they want to start creating this replicable sales system.
Sure.
Like one step they could take that seems like manageable.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. Yeah. Cause I did talk about a lot of things and it can be very overwhelming. Yeah. So, I think it's just that's why I talk about it in this order, because I think it's really simple. Like just have your, 10-year-old niece look at your website and say, okay, can you tell me what this company does? Really good. And if your 10-year-old niece is like, I don't know, I have no idea, then, maybe you just need to dumb it down a little bit. Right.
Yeah. It's a good example.
10-year-old should be able to figure it out. And so, just go to your website without scrolling, just what we call above the fold. What do you do? Who do you do it for? And if someone were interested, what's the next step? In other words, we call it a call to action in marketing. Yep. Is there a giant button that says, contact me, book a book a chat, something. I don't make it like book a giant, book a 2 hour evaluation. No, that's too heavy. Like
Right.
make it light and casual, like book a chat. We're just going to have book a conversation. We're just going to chat and see what's going on. Right.
Okay.
And so the lighter and easier, more light and breezy it is, the more people will click it. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
I like that.
yeah. And so that's the first step.
Mhm.
Second is to simplify your web page. Now, you said, people are like, oh, geez, that's a lot. Where do I start? I mean, ChatGPT it shouldn't write your website for you, but it can make things a lot easier. Like, hey, can you just take all this text
Yeah.
from my website and just
Yeah.
rewrite it to be less intimidating?
Yep.
You take the output and you don't just paste it, right? You're gonna go through it and rewrite it in your own with your own personality,
Right.
and that kind of thing.
Yep.
But it just makes stuff so much easier and so much faster, right?
Exactly. It gives you like you're 50% of the way there in like the first 10 seconds instead of having to start with a blank slate. So now,
yeah, it solves the blank page problem, which is the hardest part, right?
Exactly. This is all fantastic information and I really appreciate it. If someone wants to reach out to you and talk to you directly, how do they find you?
Okay, a couple ways. The easiest way is to go to my main website, bolt.io. That's B as in boy, OLTT.io, or boltexecutivecoaching.com. Either way, they can get to me. Yeah.
Very cool. And the other thing we do on the Rebel Roundtable is we have a Spotify playlist of all of our Rebel anthems. And so what is your current Rebel anthem? What song do you put on when you want to rebel against society?
I put on Rhythmine by ZZ Top because it rocks. It rocks hard.
It's always fun to get some really rockin' music going if you're trying to get yourself pumped up for something. So I will add that to the Rebel Roundtable playlist on Spotify and share that out to everybody. So
sounds good.
Thank you, Sanjit. I really appreciate your time. There's probably a round 2 of us coming up in the near future to talk about more detail on leadership and that kind of thing. But yeah,
you got it.
Very good. Well, thanks to everyone for watching, and I will see everybody actually in 2 weeks. I will be at a conference next week, so 2 weeks.